The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining today's session. My name is Siti Sarifah, and I am from Product Engineering team. So for today, right, we're going to talk about Singapore GST rate changes and how we're going to get at this one within our SAGE 300. But for this time, right, we will be focusing more on option number 2, which targeting to businesses or to those that has more complex business requirement, especially in their tax tracking report. Okay, so before we start, right, let's take a look at our agenda for today. Okay, so in the introduction part, right, we will take a look back at what are the preparation need to be done at your side before you can start charging 8% GST, and what are the version recommended by SAGE to be used by you for the SAGE 300. Okay, and then in the next slide, right, we will take a look at what are the difference between option number 1 and also option number 2, and why SAGE come out with 2 options for the next year Singapore GST rate changes. Okay, just to highlight to all of you, right, we have done option 1 before back then in August 2022. And we hope that, right, in today's session, we can elaborate more on option number 2. Okay, and then in the next slide, right, we will take a look at what are the setup required to be done at your side before you can start charging 8% GST. For examples, right, your existing tax classes and your existing tax rate need to be changed to occupy with option number 2. And then for those who have Singapore tax report module, right, you will also need to modify your Singapore tax code mapping to occupy with option number 2. Okay, and then in the next slide, right, we will also talk about, we will demonstrate to you, we will teach you how you can do a patch changes on your existing item tax class or customer tax class or even vendor tax classes. Okay, in SAGE 300, right, if you want to do a changes in your existing item tax class or customer tax class or even vendor tax class, right, you will have to do it manually one by one. And by doing it one by one, right, I mean by going to the screen one by one, right, it will require a lot of effort from your side. So we will teach you how you can do a batch changes on your existing item or customer or even vendor tax classes so that it will require less effort from your side. Okay, and then we will also have a live demo in SAGE 300, which is also based on option number 2. Okay, just to highlight to all of you, right, for today's session, our demo, our screenshot will be using SAGE 300 web version. And in summary section, right, we will take a look back at what we have discussed so far or what we have done so far for next year Singapore GST rate changes. And of course, if you have question, right, you may raise it during Q&A session. All right, so before we start, right, let's take a look at what are the preparation need to be done at your side. This is just a general preparation. First thing first, right, you will have to make sure that your existing SAGE 300 system is already installed with tax services, and this tax services, right, is already activated in your system. Okay, you will also need to make sure that your tax reporting currency is already set in Singapore dollar. And for those who have Singapore tax report module, right, you will have to make sure that your Singapore tax module is already activated with a valid license. Now, for the version that SAGE support for SAGE 300, at SAGE, right, our support policy is always current version plus 2 version behind. For example, now, right, we are in 2022. So the version that SAGE support for SAGE 300, right, is SAGE 300 2021 plus, SAGE 300 2022 plus 2 version behind, which is SAGE 300 2021 and SAGE 300 2022. However, right, as I mentioned in my previous session for option number 1, right, there is no restriction on the version itself. You can still use your older version as long as it's occupied. It's fully made with these 3 things above. Okay, of course, if you're using SAGE 300 2018, right, and you want to start using Singapore tax report module, right, you will have to upgrade your SAGE 300 version to become at least SAGE 300 2019 and above. Why? That is because Singapore tax module is only available from version 2019 and above. Okay, so now let's take a look at what are the difference between option number 1 and also option number 2. Okay, we have done this option 1 before in August 2022, and we hope, right, in today's session we can elaborate more on option number 2 and why SAGE come up with 2 options for the next year Singapore GST rate changes. Okay, at SAGE, right, we try to cover every possible business scenario into consideration, and this is why we come up with option number 1 and also option number 2. For each option, right, there is no right or wrong. you can elect to choose which option that is much more suitable for you based on your business requirement and also how you want your tax class to display in your tax tracking report. Okay. So to demonstrate to you, right, what are the difference between these two options, right? I will demonstrate to you straight away from my Sage 300 web version. Okay. So this is my web environment for option number 1. And to demonstrate the difference, right, I will be using standard Sage 300 tax tracking report for this purpose. Okay. This tax authority, I need to key in my tax authority. Okay. And then for the physical period that I'm going to select, right, I want to display my invoice from 2022 until 2023. Assume that we are already in 2023 and the tax rate is already changed to 8%. Okay. So what will be my tax tracking report will looks like when I print using option number 1. Okay. So when I click on print button, right, this is my detailed tax tracking report for option number 1. Okay, notice here, right, in 2022, I have created an invoice with the tax rate 7% in here. It's fine because 2022, we are basically still at 7%. Notice here also, right, my tax class is still is tax class 1 in 2022. Okay, so then, right, when I come to 2023, right, I have created one invoice as well. Okay, and the invoice, right, is charged at 8%, which is also fine because when we come to 2023, we are already charged at 8% already. Okay, and the tax class in here, right, is also using tax class number 1, which is similar to 2022. So what happened if I view this report, right, in summary level for option number 1? Okay, so because in summary, right, you are grouping by tax authority and also tax class. So you will notice that, right, your tax amount, right, will be grouped by under tax class 1. Again, you have seen in detailed report, right, we are using tax class 1 for 2022 and also tax class 1 for 2023. So when you view this in summary level, right, you will actually group by your tax amount under tax class 1. Okay, so this is for option number 1. Now, let's take a look what are the different for option number 2. Okay. Okay, so this is my another web environment for option number 2. To demonstrate to you, right, the different, I will still using standard Sage 300 tax tracking report. Okay. Right. So the physical period that I'm going to select, right, is similar to my selection in option number 1, which I'm going to select from 2022 December until January 2023. I want to see what are the difference between each option. Okay. And when I click on print, right, okay, so this is my detailed tax tracking for option number 2. Notice here, right, in 2022, I have 2 invoice, assume that I have 2 invoice, and this invoice, right, is charged at 7%, which is fine. Notice here, right, my tax class in 2022, right, is using tax class 1. Okay, but then when it comes to 2023, I have 1 invoice created as well. And this invoice, right, charged at 8%, which is fine. Okay, but my tax class in here, right, is using tax class number 8 for 2023. So what happened, right, if I view this tax tracking report, right, in summary level for option number 2? Okay, again, for summary, right, because it is grouped by tax authority and your tax class. So you will notice that, right, under the tax class, it will actually, the amount is fall under each tax class. For example, this tax class 1, we are using this tax class 1 in 2022. And when we move to 2023, right, our tax class is already changed to tax class number 8. So it will fall under each tax class under 2 different lines in here. Okay, so this is for option number 2. As I mentioned earlier, right, you will see more details for this option number 2 in my upcoming slide. All right, so now let's take a look at what are the setup required to be done at your side before you can start charging the 8% GST? Okay, before we start, right, I would like to highlight some of the basic guidelines for you to follow. First thing, before you proceed, please make sure you have a database backup of your actual production data. Why? Because if you do anything wrong during your tax changing, right, you can always revert back to your actual production data. Okay, and then second one, right, we advise user to do all the changes during the cut-off date. Okay, this cut-off date, right, is actually based on normal IRAS calendar, which is 31st December 2022 is the last day for you to use 7% GST rate. Okay, so if last day of 2022, right, 31st December 2022 fall on public holiday or Saturday or Sunday, you may swift back your cut-off date to become the day earlier, for example, 29 or 38, 28 or even 30th December 2022. Okay, so the reason why we emphasize this one, right, is because we want to prevent any kind of transaction that is using 8% GST rate before the actual start date, which is 1st January 2023. Okay, so now let's take a look at what are the setup need to be done at your side before you can start charging 8% GST rate. Okay, so the first one, right, you will need to change on your tax classes. How are you going to do that? First, you have to navigate to tax services and then choose tax classes. Okay, so for example here, right, in my screenshot here, first you have to click on this tax services menu, and then once the sub menu appeared, right, you have to click on tax setup. Once the sub menu appeared, right, you have to click on tax classes, right? So what need to be done when my tax classes screen appeared? All right, so the first thing first, right, you will have to key in all the header information in here. For example, this is a mandatory field. Your tax authority is a mandatory. You can select your default tax authority, right, by using this magnification glass, or if you know your default tax authority, you can directly key in here. Okay, and then for the transaction type, okay, in Sage 300, right, we have two transaction type. One is for sales, another one is for purchase. For the next year Singapore GST rate changes, right, you will have to do for both transaction type. But since for today, right, we are lacking of time, I will only demonstrate to you how to do the changes on sales transaction type. Later, after you go back to your place, right, you will have to do for purchase as well. Okay, and then for the class type in here, right, okay, again in Sage 300, we have two class type for each transaction type. For example, for sales transaction type, right, we have item class type and also customer class type. Okay, choosing which class type you want to change, right, is actually depends on how you set up your tax level. And because in my demo, right, in my demo environment, I set my tax level to be at item tax class. So I will choosing item as a class type. All right, so what need to be done after I select on item? Okay, so to do this, right, I will demonstrate to you straight away from Sage 300 web version. Okay, so first thing first, right, you will have to go to tax services. Okay, and then once the sub menu appeared, right, you select on tax setup and choose tax classes. Okay, here in the header informations, right, you will have to key in your default tax authority, or just simply use this magnification glass and choose select. Okay, again, transaction type here, we have two transaction type, sales and also purchase. You will have to do for both transaction type. Okay, and then this class type, right, is depend how you set up your tax level. Okay, but in my demo, right, because I set up my tax class to be at item tax level, so I will choose item tax class. Okay, so now what need to be done when this screen appeared? For option number 2, okay, first thing first, I will click on the add line button, and then I will add new tax class to handle GST rate at 8%. Okay, so I will click on this add line button, right? Okay, and then I will key in my default okay, so this one, right, for option number 2, right, I will basically create a new tax class to handle standard rated at 8% GST rate. Okay, so once I have done this ones right, I will click on save button and system will save the information for me. Okay, all right, so we're done with tax classes. Now let's move to the next setup, which is tax rate. Okay, so we have basically done adding a new tax class, and now we want to add tax rate. We want to assign 8% GST rate for the newly created tax class. How we're going to do that is first by navigating to the tax services and then choose tax rate. For example, here, click on this tax services menu, choose tax setup and choose tax rate. Okay, so what need to be done when my tax rate screen appeared on my, oh, sorry. Okay, so I will just demonstrate to you what need to be done in here. Okay, so if you are using Sage 300 web version, right, it is very easy for you to navigate from one screen to one screen. Okay, so for example, in here, right, I am in tax setup screen. I can directly click on tax rate screen. It will bring me to tax rate screen. Or if you are outside from this tax setup, right, you can always go back to tax services, click on tax setup and choose tax rate. It will basically bring you to the tax rate screen. Okay, so now what need to be done in here? First thing first, you will have to key in all the default mandatory field in the header, right? So first thing first, you will need to key in your default tax authority, either by using this magnification glass or directly type in here. Okay, and then the transaction type. Again, in Sage 300, we have two transaction types, sales and also purchase. You will have to do for both transaction type. All right, so for today demo, right, I will only demonstrate on sales transaction type. Okay, so now it has populated, it has displayed to me what are my existing tax rate, tax class in here. Okay, notice that, right, for tax class number 8, this is the newly tax to handle 8% GST rate. Okay, so what need to be done in here, right? I need to assign this newly tax class with 8% GST rate. So how I'm going to do that is by using this taxable column, the first column, right, and then assign a 8% in here. Okay, click on the save button and system will save the information for me. All right, so that's what to be done in the tax rate screen. Okay, now let's take a look at what need to be changed for your Singapore tax module. Okay, if you are installing Sage 300 Singapore tax report module, right, you will also need to modify your Singapore tax code mapping to occupy with option number 2. Okay, so first thing first, right, you will navigate to Singapore tax report. Okay, and then select TS tax code mapping and choose tax code mapping. For example, in here, right, I will click on this Singapore tax report menu, the one with Singapore flag in here. And then once the sub menu appeared, right, I will select on TS tax code mapping and choose tax code mapping. Okay. So what need to be done when my tax code mapping screen appeared? Okay. So again, you will have to key in all the header information in the above. Okay. I will demonstrate to you straight away from my web environment. Okay. Let me close this one first. Okay, so for Singapore tax report module, right, first you need to click on Singapore tax report and then choose TS tax code mapping and choose tax code mapping in here. All right, it is the same process. Okay, you will have to key in your default tax authority and also select your transaction type. Okay, you will have to do for both sales and purchase later after you come back to your place. All right. Okay, so you notice that for the newly tax class created before, which is tax class number 8, there is no code assigned in here. So you will have to click on this column and then choose this magnification glass and assign standard rated, because this one is a standard rated. Okay, you don't have to save, it will automatically save the information for you. Okay, so That's it for Singapore tax code mapping. All right. So now, right, we will demonstrate. I will demonstrate to you how you can do a batch changes on your existing item tax class or customer tax class or even vendor tax classes. Okay, as I mentioned earlier, right, if you want to change your item tax class in Sage 300, it will be a bit difficult because you have to do it one by one. Okay, so now I will teach you how you can do a batch changes so that it will require less effort from your side. Okay, so to do a batch changes right, this is basically the step that you need to follow. First one, you will have to export your item from Sage 300, and then once you download it, once you export and you download it right, you will have to change on the item defaulted tax. And then once everything is done, then you will need to re-import your item back into Sage 300. Okay, so I will demonstrate to you straight away from the Sage 300 web system. Okay. So for item, right, first thing you will have to click on inventory control, click on IC item and price list, and choose items. Okay. First thing first, you will need to export your item into Excel file. Okay. How you're going to do that is by clicking on this gear option button and then choose export. All right. So the file type in here, right, is always Excel. Okay, and then you notice here, right, there is a lot of available field for you to tick or not tick. For this moment, right, you just tick everything and then choose on export. Okay, I will explain to you, right. Okay, once this item, right, this all the information in here, right, will be displayed in a tab, in Excel tab. I will show you it later. Okay, now let's export this one first. Right, so wait until it is 100% complete, then only you download it. Okay, and it will download into your browser download folder. Okay, open this one. Okay, so this is your downloaded item file. Okay, right, the changes that you need to be done, right, is in item tax authorities. Okay, so you notice in here, right, the two field that you need to change, right, is in the C and also D column. Okay, you just need to change on this C and also D. This C, right, is for purchase tax, and this D, right, is for sales tax. Okay, there is also purchase description, sales description, tax authority description in here. You don't have to change it. Okay, because when you upload this into 300, right, Sage 300, system will automatically pick up the description for you based on your tax class in here. Okay, so for example, right, I want to change this C001 into tax class number 8. Remember, tax class number 8 is my default tax rate for 8% GST rate. I want to charge this C001 item to become at 8% GST rate. Okay, so let me show you the difference before and after. All right, so for this item, right, C001 in my system, the tax class now is at tax class 1. Okay, and I'm going to show you, this is before I do any changes in my Excel file and re-import into 300. Okay, so now I'm going to change my Excel file here for C001 to become at tax class number 8. Okay, and this one also I want to change it just for additional. Okay, and then once I have done all these ones, right, I will click on the save button. And then I will save it into a meaningful name so that I can recall it later. All right, so you have done all the changes for this, and now, right, you want to re-import this item back into Sage 300. Okay, how you going to do that, right, is by going to inventory control. Again, click on IC item and price list, choose item. Okay, so now here again in this option gear button, previously you select on export. Now because you want to import, right, you will have to select on import. Okay, choose import. Your file type is always Excel because you have done the changes in Excel. Okay, and then this import type, right, there are 3 import type in here: insert, update, insert, update. So basically, right, for insert, right, if you do any new item and you want to insert this item back into Sage 300, you will select on insert. Okay, and update action, right, is basically you done modify something on your item list. For example, your item text classes, and you want to update it. So you will choose on update. Insert or update, right, means that if you have both scenario. Okay, so for now, right, I will just only choose on update action. And then the file locations, right, click on the browse, and then I will choose the file that I have changed before. Okay, once I have done with all this information, I will click on import. Okay, wait until it is 100% complete, then only you can close this screen. All right, so to check whether my item has been changed or not, right, my text class for item has been changed or not, then you can select your item in here. For example, I changed this item before in my Excel file, so I want to see. Okay, so previously, right, for this item, it is charged at, it is using text class number 1 for the sales text class, and now I have changed it and it's import back into 300, right? It's automatically changed to become at 8%. Okay, text class number 8, sorry. And the text class description here, right? Notice that I didn't do anything on the text class description for my Excel file. When you import into 300, right, system will automatically pick up text class description for this text class and it will display for you, so you don't have to do anything. Okay, so that's it for the batch changes on item text class. Okay, so now, right, let's take a look on the batch changes on customer or even vendor text classes. Okay, so for customer, right, first thing you will need to navigate to AR module. And then once the sub menu appeared, right, you will have to choose on AR customer. And for vendor, right, you will have to navigate to AP module and choose AP vendors and select vendors. Okay, so what are the steps need to be done? Okay, it's actually basically the same thing like you did for item. Like I have demonstrated to you for item text classes. First thing first, you will have to export your information from Sage 300. And then on the changes, right, for customer, the column name that you need to change in your Excel file, right, is tag STTS1. Okay, and then for vendor, right, the column names that you need to change is text class 1. Okay, and then once you have done all the changes in your Excel file, then you need to save it and then do the third step, which is you have to re-import your changes back into Sage 300 using the import button. It's very similar to what we did for item. Okay, so that's it for the batch changes. Now I'm going to demonstrate to you straight away from Sage 300 for option number 2. Okay, for the scenario that I'm going to demonstrate, right, assume that I have a sales order in 2022. Okay, and in 2022, right, my sales order is basically charged at 7% because we haven't charged at 8% yet. We didn't go to 2023 yet. Okay, so what will be when I come to 2023, right, I want to create a shipment or invoice based on this sales order. Okay, so how actually it will look like. So to demonstrate to you, right, I will demonstrate straight away from my Sage 300 web version. Okay, this is the scenario. I have order entry in 2022, which I haven't shipped it yet, right? I will call this order entry. Okay, notice that, right? My order date is at December 28, 2022. Okay, and the status for this order, right, is already posted. Okay, what is my total in here? All right, so my total in here, right, is actually $70, which is a 7% of this 1,000. Okay, my amount in here. All right, so what if I am already in 2023? Assume that we are already in 2023 and I want to create a shipment entry based on this order. Okay, how it will look like if I'm using option number 2. All right, so to create a shipment entry based on this order, right, I will just click on this shipment entry. Okay, so it is basically very simple to navigate from one screen to another screen using Sage 300 web. Okay, or if you are not inside these OE transactions, right, you can always go back to order entry and then click on the shipment. Okay, all right, so this is my OE shipment entry. I will call back my customer for this order entry, which is C002. Okay, and the order entry, right, I will choose this order entry, which is basically this order number. Okay, all right, so now what is the total in here? It's still 0 because basically I haven't do any shipment yet. Okay, all right, so now I'm going to ship this order either by click on this ship all or just key in my ship quantity in here. Now, what is the total for my shipment in here? When I go to totals, right? Okay, so it will still charging me at 7%. System will automatically pick up 7% rate. Why? Because you are calling from this order number. Okay, and if you think that, right, if you think that this shipment is supposed not to be charged at 7%, it's supposed to be charged at 8%, you can always change that actually by going to this tax and then change the tax class to tax class number 8. Remember, this tax class 8, right, is actually meant for standard rated 8% GST rate for option number 2. Okay, and then choose select. But for this invoice, right, for this shipments, right, I want it to be charged at 7%. I still want it to be charged at 7%. So I will cancel this transaction. But if you want it to be charged at 8%, you know that it can be changed. All right. So now I'm going to post this shipment and I'm going to create invoice based on this shipment number. Okay, so posting completed. Posting completed, and then I want to create an invoice based on this shipment. Okay, so I'm going to recall back my customer for this C002. Okay, and then the shipment number here, right? I'm going to call back my shipment for this. Okay, all right. So what are the total for my invoice after I recall this shipment? Okay, it's still at 7% GST rate. Why? Because it's coming from your shipment. Okay, and again, if you think that this invoice, right, should not be charged at 7% because you are basically already in 2023 and you want to change the rate to become at 8%, you can always do that by going to this tax. Sorry. Okay, by going to item line and then click on this pencil, okay, and change the text class in here to become at 8. All right. So when you go to totals, right, it will automatically change the tax rate for you based on tax rate, tax class number 8. And because for this invoice, right, I don't want it to be charged at 8%. I still want it to be charged at 7% because basically the order is coming from 2022. Okay, so I'm going to change it back to tax class number 1. Okay. All right, so I'm good with this invoice. I'm going to post it. Okay, so notice that here, right, my invoice number is INV001. Okay, so my invoice now already posted. What will be it looks like when I click on tax tracking report. Okay, so for this one's right, I will go to tax services and click on tax report. I will use the same method as I demonstrated to you earlier for the each option. All right, so the fiscal period, right, I still want to select from 2022 until 2023 because I want to see the difference between each tax rate, right? Okay. And when I view my tax tracking details report, right, notice that the new invoice is coming into 2023. Okay, and the tax class is actually tax class 1. Because why? Tax class 1 is actually maintaining in 2022. And because you charge your rate, right, you charge your tax class to be at tax class 1, you didn't do any changes, so it still charge you at 7%. Okay, so this is the demo. All right. So we are in summary section, right? So what we have learned so far, I have demonstrated to you for each option, right? Option 1 and also option 2, the changes on your tax class and tax rate. You will need to do the changes on your existing tax classes and also existing tax rate. Okay, and for each tax class and tax rate, right, you will need to do for both transaction type, sales and also purchase. Okay, and then for point number 2, right, issuance of invoice or credit note at 7% or 8% after 1st January 2023. Right, I have demonstrated to you in live demo, whereas you can choose whether you want to 7%, whether you want to set your invoice at 7% or 8%, right? It depends on you. The code is still maintained and the rate is still maintained in your database system. Okay, so you can select whether you want to charge your invoice at 7% or 8%. Okay. And issuance of tax invoice reflecting both 7% and 8% as separate line item. Again, I have demonstrated to you the both tax class, right, is available in your system. Okay, whether you are choosing option number 1 or whether you are choosing option number 2, okay, you can always select which option, which rate you want to charge your invoice. Okay, so Q&A session. If you have any questions, right, you may raise it during this Q&A session. Lynn, I think I pass the time back to you. Lynn, Monica?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, all right. So I believe we are waiting for the questions to coming in.
Okay, the first question that we have come to our the session is, give me a moment. City is stage 300, are we able to run the demo on stage 300 but on prime version or not on the web version?
Yes, definitely. Oh, sorry, you want a demo on desktop version, isn't it? On Prime version, right?
Yes.
Okay, actually, right, whatever I demonstrate to you, right, whether it's using Sage 300 web version, right, it is the same menu available in your Sage 300 desktop version. So it should not be an issue if you want to try this later on your side. Okay?
Okay. The next question is regarding the order entry to invoice entry. If we did not change the tax class in shipment order, will we still issue the invoice entry or not?
I think this one Monica will explain.
Okay. Can you repeat the question again, Lynn?
Regarding the order entry to the invoice entry, so if we did not change the tax class in the shipment order, will we still able to issue the invoice entry or not?
You still can issue the invoice, but now you have to check whether your tax class, your tax, is it correct or not? Because it depends on before or after you issuing the you receive the payment or deliver the goods. If you are already delivering the goods and you should, let's say before 2022 end of the year, and then you should still charging them 7%. But if you are following the transition rule, you already done a sales order, but there is no shipment or invoice, then you should follow what the transaction rules say. You have to change it to become 8%, and then you ship out your shipment. The key here is your invoice itself. If you already invoiced with 7%, but you actually did not send out the item or you did not collect the money, then you have to do a credit note to knock off the invoice and of the 7%, and then you reissue a 8% invoice. So inside the OE entry is before you do your invoice, you can change anything as per transaction rule mentions that if you already posted, then you have to raise a credit note to knock off the 7% and reissue a new sales or the invoice or sales order, okay, to get it done properly for the 8%. Okay, these are specified inside the transition rules, and we have the last seminar, which will be on the 20th of December, to talk about this. Okay. May I answer the questions?
Yes, there's another one coming similar. So the OE is done in December 2022. The PL is done in January 2023. The IE is also done in January 2023. So will the invoice tax also change or not?
Sorry?
Sorry? PL.
Correct. I repeat the question. So there's OE right now is done in December 2022. The PL is done in January 2023. Same thing for IE is also done in January 2023. The question is, will the invoice tax also change or not?
Okay. So for invoice, right, it will actually come from your order entry. Okay. If your order entry in 2022, right, charged at 7%. So when you create invoice in 2023, it will still follow your 7%. Okay. If you think that this invoice, right, should not be charged at 7%, as I demonstrate to you, you can always change this invoice to become 8%. Okay, but by default, right, when it comes to 2023, because you are creating invoice based on your sales order in 2022, and your sales order in 2022, right, is charged at 7%. So when you create invoice in 2023, it will bring over your tax total, your 7% GST rate from your order in 2022. Okay. The option to change the tax rate, right, is depends on you. As I have demonstrated to you, right, you can always change your invoice using the pencil, the edit pencil in your screen. Okay.
Okay, the next question is what Sage 300 version currently support the existing Singapore tax module?
All right. So to answer these questions, right, as I have highlighted before, I think during the presentation, during the guideline, right? Okay, for Singapore tax module, right, it is only available from version 2019 and above. So if you are using Sage 300 2018 and below, right, and you want to start using Singapore tax report module, you will have to upgrade your Singapore tax module, your Sage 300 version to become at least at Sage 300 2019 and above. Okay. And I think just to highlight to all of you, right, we are in plan because for ASR plus, right, okay, we are planning to upgrade our Singapore tax module to do an online submission. Okay.
So Siti, the next question is it mandatory to use Singapore GST pack order in order to use the GST rate changes, or a customer can just using the 300 with some of the GST rate change?
Okay. So if we're talking about reporting, right, in Singapore tax module, we have our own standard tax reporting. Okay, maybe I can demonstrate to you in here. Okay, so for Singapore tax, this is our tax tracking standard Sage 300 tax tracking report. If you are not using Singapore tax module, right, you can use this tax tracking report to submit your tax information. But if you are using Singapore tax report modules, right, you can go to, there is a GST form 5 form here, whereas you can generate. Okay. Oh. Okay. So I think I have one issue here. Sorry.
You have transaction that is not mapped to the tax code, so it's okay.
Okay. I don't have transaction in this as well. So I probably need to do. Okay. So for Singapore tax module, right, we have this information in here. Whereas each version, it will, okay, whereas you can generate your report based on this form 5 filing form. Okay.
The other words is if you do not using Singapore tax, you still can change your tax rate.
Okay, so for example, in here, right, if you want to view, you have a form 5 filing form for Singapore tax module. Okay, so this is the form that is generated from Singapore tax report module. Okay, so notice that, right, it is very similar. The form, right, is designed very similar to what IRAS requirement. Okay, so you can use this form, right, to submit your tax to IRAS. Okay, and just to update, right, we are planning to move this into online submission, but we are still in the plan to move it to online submission later. At this moment, right, for Singapore tax module, right, you can use this form because it's basically almost similar to what IRAS requirement, okay, to the form 5 from IRAS, right? So you can use all the information on the box itself and then submit to IRAS, okay? And similarly, if you want to use, if you don't have Singapore tax module, you can also use your standard Sage 300 tax tracking report.
Hmm.
Okay, I hope
Okay.
it's answer your question. Next
Yes.
question, Lynn.
Siti, will we be giving out the Sage 300 user guide on setting up the tax rate and the class change or not? A user guide for the user to know the step by step.
Okay. So I think Monica, we are planning to upload this slide right later.
Yes.
Monica?
So the slides will be included as well with the recorded webinar on the video as well with the content presentation. So we will be sharing to all people that have registered for the event, even though you have not attended, your colleagues will be able to view the content as well. The next question, Siti, can you elaborate more on how can we have both 7% and 8% GST in the same invoice? And how does the final invoice looks like with have the total part of the value?
Okay. So to demonstrate this ones, right?
So in fact, just now, Siti have demonstrated. We can send the recorded video so that you can make the playback again.
Can I just answer on behalf of for these questions? Okay, so in IRA's transition rule, you should not put 7% and 8% transitions on the same invoice. I'm talking about invoice. Okay, so if you have a 7% items need to be invoiced, then you select those only deliver the item, because inside your OE, when you select the items, you will be able to select saying this item already shipped, and then these are under 7%. Then you close your that particular shipment using an OE invoice to make it as a 7%. And those items that has not been shipped, you should change it to become 8% and invoice as a 8% when if that is across the cut-off date already. So these are specified inside the transition rules. And for Sage 300, you just have to follow the transition rules and then make sure that the items are go into the correct invoice. So, and just to make sure that those people who already invoiced the items in 7%, but you have not delivered or collect the money, and what you have to do is let's say there are 10 items. 3 of them you already collect the money, so these 3 items is still under 7%, but the others 7 items have not collecting the money or have not do the shipment. So you have to use a credit note to knock off these 7 items and then recreate an invoice with 8% for this 7 items. Okay, these are following the transition rule. It is not follow Sage 300 rule, it's following transition rules by IRAS. The key here is we give you a flexibility of how you can modify the percentage of your transactions for individuals item, but you have to decide it yourself or check the items, what are the item has been shipped or what have not been shipped or been received the payment. Okay, those information you need to follow the IRAS transition rules.
Okay.
So to add in Monica explanations, right? Okay, if you are telling me, okay, if you want to create a new item, new line, right? Okay, for example, in here, my first item is charged at tax class 8. Okay, and then my second item, right, is charged at tax class 1. So means that, okay, in Sage 300, right, the flexibility is there. You can choose whether you want to select on 7% or 8%. It depends on your transaction. Okay. I think, Lynn, next question.
Okay. So Siti, the next question is from the customer. Can we change the tax class to 8% before 1st January 2023?
Okay, as I highlight to you, right? Okay, we recommend user, we advise user to do the changes before the cut-off date. Okay, for example, 31st December 2022. If you want to do it before 2023, right? Before 1st January 2023, it is advisable for you to do it at the last day of 2022. For example, 31st December 2022. Okay, so we always advise user to do it. If 31st December 2022, right, is fall on public holiday or Saturday, where basically you are not working, right, you can sweep that cut-off date to become the day earlier. But we always emphasize it to be done at last day of 2022. Okay.
Thank you, Siti. The next question is, can we change the tax report default class to 8% instead of the tax 1?
For which option? Okay, so for option number 2, right? Okay, you need to change your tax class to become at default tax class number 8. Okay, because we are basically adding a new tax class. In 2022, right, your tax class is still at tax class 1. So now when it comes to 2023, you need to change your tax class to become at tax class number 8 for option number 2. And if you want to change, what do you mean by you want to change your report tax class? If you want your tax tracking report, right, is actually calling from your transaction. When it display your tax class, it's calling from your transaction. So if you want to change this tax class, right, I think modify your, you probably need to custom your tax tracking report already. Okay, because
I'm
our
sorry,
Sage 200 standard tax tracking report, right, is calling the tax class from the transaction itself. Okay.
Okay. And Siti, we have 2 more questions. The next question is, if our open PO is at 7%, when we receive a supplier invoice in 2023 at 8%, were we able to match the PO against the invoice or not?
Yes. The answer is yes. Why? Because I think I'm not sure. Maybe Monica, you can help me to answer this.
Okay, if you want to do a matching, you actually match with the PO number, because when you do your PO, there is no transactions has been passed to tax tracking report at all. It's only when you key in the invoice, then the invoice will actually update AP invoice, and that is the time where the transaction has been passed to tax services. Okay, so if you want to match back the PO number, that is not a problem, even the item number as well. Okay, now the question is, sometimes when you are keying the transactions like 7%, and you send it to the vendor, and the vendor will delay your shipments or whatever until 3 months later, which means it's already past the cut-off date. And at the time when you when you call back the PO, when they're doing the receiving, of course, you will not know what is happening, the people just receiving it, but the person who do the PO to change it to become invoice, that is the time that you need to check. You need to see whether this original PO, is it created like in 2022 with the 7%, and then now when you receive, the vendor actually charge you the 8%. So that is the time that you need to match, because even though you ask your PO is like sending in 2022 with 7%, and then the vendor can only supply the goods to you on January, the vendor will actually charge you based on 8%. So that is the time that you have to make sure that you revise the tax classes of that PO and make sure that they are 8% already. Okay, that is the reason why we actually have advised some people saying that, okay, now you have the options to do it, which means tax class 1 is 7%, test class, the new adding a new test class with number 8%, so that you will be able to adjust based on if this PO have some item is 7% and some item is 8%, and then according to based on the vendor's invoice, you will be able to adjust whether you're using the test class 1 or the new test class 8, which is with the 8%. Okay.
Okay, thanks,
the
Monica.
key here is
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, so the next question is, in the Sage 300 desktop version, why can't we see the effective date under the tax rate setting? Is it because of the version or not?
I think for this one's right.
You will not see it under the tax classes for effective date. You only see it in the tax mapping, tax code mapping, which you require to have a Singapore GST modules to see the effective date.
Okay. Just want to go with the last question, and we have some in my Issuance system. I've checked, but we do not have code mapping function. Will it affect the tax tracking or not?
If you're, I believe the tax code mapping, right, is only for Singapore tax report module. If you are not using Singapore tax report module, right, this tax code mapping will not available in your 300 system. Okay, to answer whether it affect or not, right, it will not affect your standard Sage 300 tax tracking report. Okay.
Okay. The next question, I think that is the last question that comes. Can we change the tax class 1 to 8% and we create another new tax class to 7%?
Yes, it is basically you are referring to option number 1, whereas we have explained it before in August 2022. Okay.
Okay, great. So with all the users and attendees, just to let you guys know, we all know that we are very excited with the Sage 300, with the GST transition coming to 8% in 2023. And we left 5 weeks from now on. We are going to organize another Singapore GST transition rules on 20th December 2022. The same speakers that we engaging are Catherine Chiang, who is the expert on GST. So do look out for our invitation. And if you have any concern and any question about the GST transition rules, feel free to join us. This is a chargeable event. However, if you are on the valid Sage cover on Sage 300, you will be entitled complimentary to join us. So look out for our invitation. And on the behalf of the Sage team, thanks for joining this session. We will see you in a month time on 20th December if you are interested to learn more about GST transition rules. Thank you so much. We shall speak again. Goodbye.
Goodbye. Bye-bye.
Bye, thank you.